Yo guys, welcome to The Last Lap. Don't forget to drop a lovely, juicy 5-star rating if you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. Hello everyone, and welcome to The Last Lap podcast. Hope you're all doing well. We are here in an off week, in between the Saudi Arabian Grand
Smelly
Prix.
week, mouldy week.
A smelly week. Oh yeah, gone off week, right?
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. If
That's
this
it,
week was in the
sell-by
back
date
of the
week.
fridge, you'd know about it when you open it up.
Yeah. It's the cheese that you kind of just smell at the back and you go.
Although that wouldn't put this one off if you are watching on good video platforms like YouTube.
Yes.
For example, you'll see the mint and the sausage dog is here. He's joining us again today.
Yes.
Are you going to snore like last time? Or are you just going to sit and be a good boy?
He can't fall asleep again. I feel like that's a bad endearment to our job that we are doing. He can't sleep again.
Well, it rained as well, like on the way in, and when he gets wet, he gets the zoomies like crazy. So I think he's knackered himself out running around the studio.
Right.
But
We'll let him run around again. Extra content, you know what I mean? Get him on the table. Slide down there.
But don't worry, you don't need Minton for today's podcast. No, you don't, because we have a very, very wonderful, beautiful, handsome, special guest. It is F1 TV and Channel 4 Formula One commentator, Supreme, Alex Jacques.
That is an intro.
That was one.
That was an amazing intro.
Yeah.
And we really don't need to do anything else now, do we?
No.
I mean, that's it. That's it. World class intro. Great to be here. Thanks very much. Good night.
Like and subscribe.
He's a very expensive man to have on, is Alex Jacques.
It's absolutely not true.
Budget blown.
Thank you for coming on, mate.
Oh, it's an off week. Yeah, you'd know it. You open the fridge, you'd smell it. Also, hold on, reboot.
We're just setting the tone, all right? We're just setting the tone because we don't take ourselves too seriously on this one. But Alex, mate, thank you very much for coming on. And how are you feeling about Australia? Early doors, and you're covering a lot of this weekend, right?
Yeah, F2. Going to Australia for the first time as well. Lucky to be commentating on that, and lucky to be commentating on the Grand Prix as well. But as you point out, not all races are done on site these days. Got to be sustainable. So as a result, it's the night shift all the way through.
So is that from Biggin Hill?
That is it from Biggin Hill, from the Media and Technology Centre for Formula One. And yeah, it is the night shift. I'm not joking.
The graveyard shift.
We're starting at, you said graveyard, I didn't say graveyard. But it is, it's going to be, it's an odd one. I've never done it before where you're going all the way through the night. So maybe once with Japan. Do you remember the Super Sunday they had where it got some sort of typhoon came in and they had to do it all on Sunday? Yeah. So that was just F1 though. So it might be even more incomprehensible than normal.
So what time does the F2 start? UK time?
On Friday, midnight, which is going to be, so expect it to get better as the weekend goes along, basically, is the promise for that. But,
how are you, have you been able to speak to any like racing drivers, or, because, you know, the F1, it's not just the drivers, to be fair, it's the whole, you know, if anything more, it's the mechanics who have to, you know, they're putting the long hours, getting there early, jet lag. Like, do you have like a plan in place to prepare yourself for the all-nighter based off the experience you've got?
You're now making me think I should have a plan in place.
Maybe this is the time to come up with a plan.
We'll come up with a plan mid-show.
Lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee on the way through. I don't know, maybe a big pub lunch the day before, a bit of a nap in the afternoon.
It sounds to me like you're winging it, Alex.
Yeah, a little bit.
Did you see Carlos Sainz's Instagram stories?
Yeah. He's on it, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's on it.
He was like talking about how it was like long. He was like waffling proper, like 3-4 stories.
Yeah,
about
trying to keep himself awake.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
Right, we'll do this.
Because I think he was saying like you don't sleep on the flight going or something. There's specific.
Yeah, you just got to basically be really, really disciplined about it. Get loads of sunlight, leave the reading light on. He was going into loads of detail. He's got a very, very good trainer. His trainer Rupert is militant about it. So I think he's just following orders.
No, fair enough. And obviously, first time F2 is going to Australia.
Yeah.
And you still cover the F2 as well. What have you made of this season so far? Because I think this F2 season this year is like building up. There's a lot of potential names.
Serious potential.
Yeah, man, for sure.
It's mad. It's completely mad because you can genuinely make a case for about 15 drivers winning a race, which is not unusual for 15 drivers to be in contention. But then you can make a serious case for about 10 drivers winning the championship, and that is unusual. Usually you have a red hot favourite, and then you might get a rookie who bolts through, does something special. That's always how it's been. It's going to be about, I think, the winner of that championship is going to be the one who minimises the bad weekends. So if you don't have the pace, can you finish fourth in the feature?
Yeah,
can you finish fifth in the feature? And Albert Park, that is not a simple circuit at all. So levels the field for everyone. Experience goes to zero.
None of them will have driven there.
No data. So even if you're a team in form, like ART have been ridiculous in qualifying, suddenly no data. So you've got to do it on the fly. I'm loving it. I'm loving the unpredictability of it.
Yeah, I think anyone watching or listening, like if you don't follow the F2,
Please do. Yeah,
like it's honestly built like this F1 season. We'll get onto this F1 season because obviously it is looking like it could end up being a bit processionary. We're hoping that's not the case.
Might not be 10 drivers who can win the championship there.
But the F2 is almost guaranteed. I mean, that sprint race in Saudi was phenomenal.
That's one of the best races I've ever done. Like, had the privilege of commentating on. That was incredible. You're like, how can the gap still be this?
It must be nice from your point of view when a race just, you can, for that instance, right? Yeah. A race that's so good, so exciting, you're just running off instinct, I imagine. You don't have to think so much about, it's been a bit stale. Yeah. We have to find a talking point. Yeah. You can just go with the flow for a race like that, right?
There.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just, to be honest, those are the races. You get different tiers of races. Like sometimes you have to work really, really hard because we have a really, really good audience, a really knowledgeable audience all the way through. I know we've got a lot of new fans, but they're picking things up so quickly. So a lot of the time you're trying to add to a pretty knowledgeable audience. So sometimes you might have to work really hard on it. Other times you're just, if it's a crash fest or a dramatic one, say like Hockenheim a couple of years ago, where there's just cars off and you're just like, right, who's that in the wall? Who's that in the wall? Who's not got a front wing there? That's a different type of challenge. But then, as you say, you get to a sprint race in Jeddah where you're like, I'm enjoying this like I'm on the sofa. I'm IDing the drivers, but that's just pure enthusiasm. That takes you back to being a kid. And those are the races that, I think those are the races where you look back and you go, God, that was fantastic. Those are the ones you remember.
Yeah. And obviously now, switch on the YouTube F1 highlights.
Yep.
It's a new voice that you hear coming back at you.
There is. That is a totally different audience to do it for as well. So that's a new development for this year. And again, massive privilege for F1 TV's commentary to be carried there.
And when you say a different audience, like what is your understanding of, because you've worked across obviously F1 TV, Channel 4. We talk about F1 audience and the boom of Drive to Survive and all that.
Yeah.
But in a more nuanced way, what is your understanding of the breakdown of different audiences? Where do you see certain audiences say more than others? So the YouTube audience versus the F1 TV audience versus Channel 4, for example.
Well, it's usually easiest to do on age, and we don't reflect on this massively because you're doing a commentary that goes out live, a commentary that goes out to a broad terrestrial audience on Channel 4, and then what is usually a 10, 12, 8-minute edit for YouTube. So you're just trying to do the best job possible, but you are aware that you've got in that audience, you might have a super fan who's watched it for 20 years. You might have someone who's left it on and has heard a little bit about it, but needs a little bit reminding of who the drivers are other than Hamilton and Verstappen. And then you have a YouTube audience who could be anything from people who are busy on Sunday to that's how people consume it, having got into Drive to Survive. So you're just trying to do the tidiest job possible, and you're not trying to insult anyone's intelligence, and you're trying to be honest. You're trying to, if a move is a DRS move, you're not trying to hype it up an enormous amount. If it's a slam dunk pass, you're not going to take the volume up. That's not realistic. If it's a thrilling, we had some great moves. If it's a thrilling move around the outside, like Lance Stroll on lap 1 in Jeddah, you're going to give it both barrels because that was one of the moves. That will be top 10 move of the season, guaranteed.
Yeah. Do you think the way that you've maybe had to present or like your commentary has kind of changed over sort of maybe the last 5 or 6 years because of like you said, there's a bit of an influx now of fans coming in from Drive to Survive. There's more of like a explanatory style of commentary that's required as well.
Well, the gold standard of commentary is if you can get the explanation in without the long-term fans understanding that you smuggled the explanation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the hard bit. That's where you actually earn your money. I say, looking off into the distance, thinking about doing it for a whole season. But no, new fans is a brilliant thing.
Yeah.
Any sport would love to have what F1 has happened to it in the last couple of years. So you just have to, to answer your question, you probably have to remember no assumed knowledge more than you did, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah,
when you knew there was a base standard. But, there are sports I consume like once a year. For instance, I'll watch a Rugby World Cup or a Rugby Six Nations, but I won't really watch it the rest of the time. And so sometimes, and I find the commentators who do that just do a phenomenal job, because they'll be like, and a quick reminder. And that's for the new fans. That's for the casual fans. That's for the people who check in, like me, once a year. Yeah. So you have to do a bit more of that than maybe we did 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, what is the kind of crossover between other sports? Like how often do you look at sports, rugby, football, volleyball, badminton, whatever? Like,
a bit of the badminton.
Like how much? Yeah. Do you think there is kind of quite a direct crossover, or do you think certain sport? Do you think F1 requires specific nuances that maybe don't exist in other sports?
Yeah, I think, again, spoke about the knowledgeable fan base. That requires you to have an intuition for the sport in a way that, it's why 2021 was quite difficult to call at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Because you had a muscle memory for what race control were going to do. And then you had something totally different to the previous, say, 2 decades of what race control were going to do. So that muscle memory of knowing the rule book almost by instinct, which is what we had last year. For example, Japan's a perfect example of it. Everyone is reacting to what the rule was meant to be rather than what the rule actually said. Which is why you had that bizarre situation where the entire, including myself, everyone got caught out by what was going on because there'd been a slight wrinkle in the writing of the rule, which has now been changed. So crossing over from other sports, no, I think there is a lot. Formula One is almost unique in that there are so many rules, there are so many precedents, there are so many things set on precedent, that you have to have a lot of knowledge. If you're going to call it, you've got to have a good feel for the what's gone before. And there's crossover. I mean, I've done plenty of sports in the past, but I think it's hard to pick up if you're not knowledgeable as a broadcaster about Formula One. I would say to do the play-by-play. I think you can come at it from different. I mean, we've seen an influx of totally different content creators, and there's been an explosion in podcasts, and there's so many new voices doing it. But for play-by-play, as the early grey hairs on the side of my head will tell you, you've got to be across absolutely everything as a result. But yeah, there's crossover from different sports, but you've just got to know it inside out. And that's true of any sport. You've just got to know it. You've got to know as much as possible, and you've just got to be on top of it.
Sorry, you mentioned Japan there. And obviously, we did the live show for the Japanese Grand
we were
Prix,
here for that.
and honestly had no idea what was going on. It was so difficult to keep track of whether Max had actually won the championship.
But again,
or not.
there was just this assumption that we there's assumed knowledge that
this is
based
how
off
it
precedent.
is.
Because it was just like, well, obviously it's reduced points because of what happened in Spa the year before. And there was just this kind of assumption, and it was never kind of countered by, I guess, the rule makers, and that's. But I mean, even like last weekend's last race with Fernando, and the whole jack incident, and then it being because the front jacks are typically allowed to touch. Like you're covering the sport live, like what you say goes straight out into the world. So it must be so difficult when even I guess that's where you get a benefit of the doubt, because no one can, like, that's such a nuanced, tiny little specific, super intricate rule that's like, oh, actually it's been clarified now and it's been changed.
Look at how they got the third place back. They got the third place back because their team manager, Andy Stevenson, has an unbelievable memory recall and knew that the penalty had not been applied evenly. So he stored that away. Should it ever happen to his team, okay, what about this example? What about this example? What about this example? And it's that knowledge that you would hope that, it's why it sometimes skews a little bit older in terms of the person behind the microphone, because you've got to have that memory bank of knowledge. And that's why he's paid to be team manager. That's why he got them the podium back. So the confusion, it's one of the most complicated sports in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And the rule book is borderline ludicrous. I mean,
do you have it like You got it in your back pocket. I thought you were about to pull it out of your back pocket.
And here it is. And
this high.
Article 33.4 says, but also Article 53.2 says, so which is it? Yeah, I mean, penalising drivers for parking in the first place when they're the best drivers in the world is somewhat confusing to me. But that's a different story. You were asking about commentary once upon a time. But yeah, something like that, you have to just let it play out. So the important thing is never, if you're uncertain, it's just never to punt. Because if you punt, you might be wrong, and then you've got to walk it back.
I guess you've always got to err on that side of caution and just like...
Sometimes just experience it with the audience. Sometimes just experience it. And I think, things are a lot less formal than they were, say, 20, 30 years ago. Now you could go, well, hold on, we're going to discover this together. And it's more of a communal experience of trying to, okay, so they just roll in the replays and we're trying to work out, has the Jack touched it at the back? Okay, it's, and all of that. So, yeah, occasionally live broadcasting is hard.
Well, you know what? I feel like I can forgive certain things as long as they're learnt from and then we don't have these shenanigans again. Right?
Yeah.
Whether it's little things like that, whether it's, the whole... How long it took for the cost cap to be analysed and the penalty to be divvied out, whatever, right? I can forgive it once, but it's just I just want the sport to learn. And it felt, I mean, particularly with I guess Suzuka last year with the Gasly thing and the tractor on track, it's just like that you have to rely on the FIA and the sport to not just. Because you can't always get it, like you say, it's the most complicated sport to officiate, arguably, in the world.
Yeah.
But then at least learn from it and adapt and improve and move forward. Because I think, generally speaking, the sport is in a healthy place. I'd say it's the healthiest place I think it's ever been.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? In terms of like the viewing figures, in terms of the...
Viewing figures, market, demographic of people watching, age of people watching. It's in a fantastic place. It's absolutely in the best place it's ever been in.
I think I'm not even going to lie. I think when I go on YouTube and I slap up my homepage and the F1 highlights are there, no matter what time it is, no matter when it came out, it's got 1 million views already.
Yeah.
And
That wasn't always the case.
that's not even the case with football highlights. When I go on Sky Sports and watch the football highlights. Unless it's like the Liverpool 7-0, I had to just get that in there. But unless it's like a game like that, then, it's crazy.
He's a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, I can tell. I can tell with the joy.
It's been a hard season, man.
Long season.
It's been a long one.
That's the whole highlights reel for the year.
That is it. Yeah, that is pretty much it. And I was here filming and missed it.
And for anyone who... Oh, yeah, because we were literally filming. And then like halfway through, it was like, it's 1-0 at half time.
Yeah.
7-0. For anyone who doesn't know, Alex... How did you get your start in motorsport broadcasting? Where did that all begin?
So I started with a little bit of student newspaper, student radio at university in Birmingham, and then did BBC local radio anywhere they would take me. And started off at Radio Suffolk, where I'm from, and then did a little bit of Radio Norfolk, a little bit of BBC Radio Leeds, a little bit of BBC Radio Manchester. Then I joined a sports agency where... I was never the best print journo, so they would ask me to do match reports, and I would be more nervous about that than I would be if doing live at Silverstone with Channel 4 or the mad audience numbers that you get on F1 TV. But I eventually just kept saying yes to any job. Kept saying yes to any freelance opportunity. I mean, sometimes you'd lose money on the train ticket, but if it was a big game, it'd be worth it because then eventually you'd have 15 minutes that you could send to producers. And I'm condensing this. And then did that for a number of years. Was also working at the Times newspaper at the same time, and then on the weekend would just take, Cardiff Leeds or whoever would take me. Sometimes it was a big game like that. Sometimes it was, Rochdale, Colchester, but just keep doing it, keep going. And then Will Buxton stood down from GP2. I sent in the old show reel. And for reasons that still aren't clear, they were like, let's try him. So, got very fortunate with that. So I went from the back row of cold League One football grounds, I think that was the last game I did, to going to Bahrain. And then you're in the back of this big TV gallery. And it was a big step up, but it's gone fairly well.
And so your first year of GP2 was
2015.
So who won that year?
That was Stoffel Van Dorn dominating, wiping the
floor.
Wow. Yeah.
What was the most impressive F2/GP2 season that you've seen? Because obviously you've commentated, you have that extra level of knowledge because you've had to do the research. You've got to know what you're talking about for each and every race, and you've done it since 2015. Which season? Because there's been like Van Dorn, Leclerc. There's been some
Bahrain.
You know,
stands out.
obviously
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Albon. That was Abu Dhabi with Albon as well. That stands out to me as an Albon fan.
Here we go. When he punted him out of the way.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it was a little bit, wasn't it?
Next
Surely.
question.
No, but so which season or driver do you think stuck out to you?
Season, I think 2018. Albon, Norris, Russell. The racing was ridiculous. Yeah, De Vries only a few points off the back, fourth, which we were mentioning over testing because he almost got forgotten, but he was very unlucky.
in that.
He was up 12, 13 points, I think, behind Alex.
Yeah,
in the end, which is
it was a really he dominated that year at Spa. Just disappeared from that group of drivers. Yeah, that was the best quality I've ever seen. They were, Alex Albon getting out of the car. I think after Baku once, and he was just. Every lap was a quali lap. They were pushing each other so far. It was phenomenal, and you knew that they were. You knew that George and Lando were going to get to F1 about halfway through.
I was going to ask, did you know they were special?
You knew that they were going to get promoted, and Lando was earmarked from such an early age. You knew he was going to find a route through, but George then he dominated that championship. I mean, it was mathematically in contention until the end, but he was the class of the field that year. And then no one expected Alex to be in the mix, apart from all the other drivers. He's a real driver's driver. And maybe everyone's looking around going, well, how's this happened? And they were like, yeah, because Alex is fast. We told you, you're not listening. Alex is terrific. And so that was a great year. De Vries had some good wins in there. And then... Yeah, if you were going to select a driver who I think had the best performance in the category since I've been doing it, it'd probably be Charles Leclerc. He was in another league to everyone in.
Is that just across the season or
just across the season? He was just hitting heights that he got thrown out of a race in Spa, and he was like, "Cool, fight through from the back." He just knew he had everyone.
It was just so much
like
better than everyone else.
It was just a classic Charles shrug. It's like, cool, it'd be exciting to fight from the back at Spa. He was in such a good place with that, and the raw speed he has is borderline ridiculous. So that was a great year as well.
Is there anyone that you've watched in Formula 2 or in GP2 as well where you've thought, right, cool, this guy has that X factor. I expect them to win a Formula 1 championship, whatever, win races in F1, and it hasn't quite worked out?
I would say that first year, 2015, Stoffel Van Dorn. I think Stoffel... If I was going to have free pick of, I can put the drivers in the seats, I'd put Stoffel back in F1. I think he's better than some of the drivers who are in F1 at the moment.
It was against Alonso.
And the thing is, Alonso...
In that McLaren as well.
He was, first season, he was out qualifying Alonso at, say, Malaysia, right? I think he got 7th on the grid in Malaysia. Yeah. Right? Well, that's a race Alonso's won, been on pole for, performed at, and then... Yeah, the downside is when things get away from you in Formula One, when your shoulders go down, it can be a very, very lonely paddock. And I think, some drivers are really good at fighting against their fate, and they'll fight until the very last race. And if they know they're heading to the exit, they'll just give it everything they have, almost in an act of rebellion against team's decision. I think from Stoffel's point of view, he's a different type of driver. He knew the writing was on the wall, and it affected his performances.
Yeah, I think it's like, have you, you're commentating on these drivers as they're coming through, and I guess it's a challenge because you know of these drivers as human beings and people, and you have conversations with, and that as well as, these names who are, in a helmet that you can't really see. Yeah. And I think we're all guilty as fans of forgetting the humanity of these drivers. Does that... Has that been a difficult part of the job? Did you understand that from the outset, or do you think that's taken time to, the human factor? Because you're talking about people. Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. I think that is more of a consideration for me than it is a consideration for you, because when you're, I'm not very sympathetic to most of the footballers. If you're watching a Super Sunday and you're, I'm an Ipswich fan, so Ipswich haven't been involved in a Super Sunday for about 23 years now, so it's not a problem. But if you're watching it as a neutral, you might get stuck in. Jack Grealish loses the ball, you might get stuck into him. Yeah. But from the drivers very, very early on, I think it's a choice. that you make very early on that you have to remember that they've made a huge amount of sacrifice to go there. They've basically deleted their childhood to have this opportunity. And some we know the names of, and we're debating here, and some very, very talented drivers, as you alluded to, who absolutely would have been fast enough to be in a Haas or be in a Williams, don't get the opportunity. And yet they've made all the sacrifice and the money, all the sacrifice with their time, all the sacrifice for the family's time as well. So much of the families get poured into this. Yeah. I think I made a decision fairly early on that I was like, I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be the paddock police. I'm going to be glass half full here. And very rarely with the junior championships, I did Formula 3 for a number of years as well, and Formula 2, you've got to go right over the line to get any sort of criticism because it costs a lot. They're risking their necks to do it. It's been their family's dream for a really long time. You've got to be sympathetic to that. I think you've got to be sympathetic to that. Now, you could have someone else in this seat go, well, they've put themselves forward and they're trying to get to Formula One. If they can't take a little bit of criticism on the way up, it's going to get much worse if you get to Formula One. So you can make an argument either way, but I've always been glass half full with them.
Yeah, I think just giving constructive criticism, someone doesn't perform, I think is absolutely fine. But at the end of the day, I think unlike football, like you said, they're risking a lot. It's a very dangerous sport. Yeah. So, realistically.
You know what? Like, I think part of it is that, and I've seen where, I started making F1 videos in 2019 and, no one was watching and you're putting your opinion out there as a fan and you don't really, what you're being shown. And it's like, as my knowledge of the sport has increased over time and I follow it now and this is my full-time job, so I'm always like, F1's my life now. Yeah. And, people criticize and be like, oh, well, you're not as out there or like bold or like brash with your like thoughts and feelings because you're like pandering. But I don't think it's pandering. I just think it's like the more you educate yourself on the sport, the more you understand the nuance. Yeah. And the more
it's not like, black and white.
The sacrifices that these drivers make. Yeah. And then, so when I've got an opinion about a driver, then I'm not going to be as cynical. Yeah. Because I feel like I get because it is like, it's tough, man. You got, especially drivers who don't come from loads of money. It's really difficult to get the support and the sponsors. Like, you have to be a business person as a teenager to get sponsors on board. Yeah. You look at a lot of these. Is it? There's a few examples of F2 drivers who do a lot of their own.
Boschong's the best.
Boschong.
That's the best example.
Boschong.
In F2. Every what is it? Cent of the euros he raises is his. Yeah. So he doesn't have the money, doesn't have a manager, not part of a F1 academy. So he's just going door to door going, will you give me money to go racing? Yeah. And he's managed to do it. And he stayed in there long enough to win a race, which was always his aim. Yeah. Won it on merit. It's a great day for him.
I love his persistence, man.
Yeah.
At least 3 times in a season, I'll hear you go, well, something about Ralph isn't here this weekend because whatever, there were just finances that aren't there. Yeah. And then he will just pop up 2 rounds later.
Did he have an injury as well?
He had a massive back injury. Could have ended his career. Yeah. Could have ended his career. So, it was a feel-good win at the start.
Yeah. It's nice seeing that Campos, because I think part of the reason F2s is, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like in recent seasons we've seen obviously MP move up the field. Yeah. It used to be just kind of Prema, ART, you and I Virtuosi
Dams were up there. Yeah. Well. Now it just feels like everybody.
It feels like there's a lot more teams that feel like they can be competitive at the front. Would you agree?
I would completely agree. I think there's a really good spread of engineering knowledge because, of course, if you make it a one-make championship, who's going to make the difference? Setup's going to make the difference. So that knowledge is so important. And I think it's really nicely spread from different teams, which is why you're getting the hyper-competitive season that we're enjoying.
It's a one-make series. It feels like it's a one-livery series half the time as well. How difficult actually is it, by the way, just to keep up with the amount of Red Bull drivers that there are in that championship?
Someone said to me after the test, it's going to be hard for you. And someone says it's going to be hard for you every year. Like, there was one year where they painted all the cars blue. And I was like, yeah, it'll be fine. Yeah. And then
there'll be some negative. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. And then you go to do your prep at the start of the year, and I was like, oh no, this is tricky. This is not what I wanted to see.
I think Enzo's is a bit easier because he's got the bright. He's at Banco Brazil or something. Yeah. He's got the bright yellow.
He's got the bright yellow.
And then Hauger's got the
Hauger, Maloney.
Yeah. Hauger's got the green, but the others all just seem to blend into each other, which isn't kind of ideal.
No, it's not ideal.
But they're all getting support.
I got to say, for the sprint race in Bahrain, I was like, if they're all together, because F2 you can get anything, right? You can get absolutely anything with F2, as we saw with the turn 4 of the feature race, where Boschung went from like 10th to 2nd, right? So you really can get any concoction of race at all. And I was like, if they're all together, I just don't know. If we've got a high angle, I just don't know if I'm thinking, well, what do I do? Can't call them a Red Bull driver because it's not the team names. I was like, well, if they all crash into each other, you're going to have to say something. And then obviously the race starts. Yeah, because
they all drive for different teams, don't they, as well?
But most of them, You've got like two same liveries but different teams, and two different liveries but same team.
I was saying to a friend about this, and they were like, "Oh, you're actually gonna have to work rather than just
well, no, because
shout about cars."
You remember when it was Joe and I lot in the UNI Virtuosi, and it was the same livery but just one blue, one red, because one was Renault and one was Ferrari.
Yeah,
that was elegant. But now the teams want their whole livery,
if you're paying for it, I get you want your team colours, but
at least put them in the same team.
It would be terrific if they could, sort of, I mean, Combox please. Why not a yellow Red Bull? Why not a red Red Bull?
Open plea to Red Bull.
Please. That's really the estimate. One more question about F2. I want to ask Piastri Sargent. I think Oscar, it was very... The perspective of Oscar and Logan was very different going into this season because of Oscar's, dominated F2.
Yeah.
Fantastic job. Logan took the long way round, but they still got to F1 at the same time.
Yeah.
What do you make of them two based off their F2 careers, and what do you think the difference is? Do you think there's much in it between them?
Pace-wise, probably not. Sargent's a go-karting champion, world champion. Yep. And that's a hard thing to win. So he's always had the ability from a very early age. Sargent and Piastri had an amazing Formula 3 championship where it went to the final round, and it really should have been Sargent. If he got to turn 4 in that race, he was going to be the champion. And he had a collision with one of the Tridents. And Piastri, even on Piastri's victory lap, if you consider that, Piastri was going, I feel bad for Logan, which shows you a couple of things. Number one, how much capacity Piastri has, full of adrenaline, just won a championship, still got that sporting moment for his teammate and championship rival. Piastri the capacity is probably a good way to describe it. 70-day Formula 3 championship because of the pandemic in 2020, he wins it. Longest ever Formula 2 championship, 3-race format, unfazed, wins that as well. And he's a driver who, little bit Carlos Sainz-like, can take a little bit of time to unlock things. Once he unlocks it, ridiculous pace and able to be adaptable. And I think that is one of the key reasons that McLaren went for him, is that they felt that he could adapt there, he can unlock different types of car, he can perform in different types of way. So I think as an all-round driver, I think Piastri's probably got the edge, but Sargent's always had phenomenal speed, and I'm really glad he's got his opportunity to show the world that, because he was in danger of being forgotten. He was in danger quite a lot of times of being left behind.
Yeah, well, because I think a lot of, just because he's American, that's the only reason he's in the sport.
Yeah.
Watch lap 1 Bahrain.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Great, wasn't it? Yeah.
That is a guy who nearly didn't get his opportunity, seizing his opportunity.
Yeah.
And I felt that, the car placement for that, heavier, full of fuel, cold brakes, cold tyres, big stops, would have been very, very easy to be that confident and to rip a wing off. But, he's absolutely worthy of the drive. And there are no charities in Formula One. These are hard-headed people who know that every point counts. There are no sympathy drives. There are no, he's only in it because of it. That just doesn't exist.
Yeah. This is the thing, right? This is what I find difficult about the sport, because the points only tell so much of the story.
Yeah.
However, the points is all that people care about when
at
you
the end
look
of the
back.
season. Yeah.
And it's like, especially in your position where you're commentating on all of these races individually, and you have to look into each driver, and you're seeing the performances, because the performances don't always corroborate to the outcome. Van Dorn, again, prime example. The context of going against Alonso, and when you actually look at the gaps over those 2 seasons, and he gets forgotten about. And actually, if you're... I guess that's the thing, right? If you're in charge of a team and you actually want the best driver, surely you have to look past the points, and you have to look at... And maybe this is why, Williams... I'm sure they were very aware of the marketing power of getting, an American driver at
doesn't hurt.
full time.
Doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. But also you look at the performances and rookie season and all that. And I think there was enough, I felt it was the right call to bring Logan in over other drivers for me, because I feel like he had shown enough from the performances because I watched that 2020 F3 season. I watched like every race for that. I was really engaged.
There was very little else to do that year.
Yeah. True. Very true.
True.
No, more than justified. I think if you're Williams as well, wanting to grow the team from where it's been over like the last 3 or 4 years, I think it's important to try and get sort of a young, exciting driver lineup that you can try and mold and you can try and grow as well.
Yeah. But I mean, we might not have any free practice sessions anymore anyway, by the sounds of it. We've had...
no more test drivers, man.
No
more Nick De Vries driving every car under the sun.
Look, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, there's been quotes from Stefano Domenicali, this would be an FIA decision as far as I'm aware. It wouldn't actually be an F1 decision. Talking about potentially can in practice, which hasn't gone down well online.
I just find the image so funny. Can you imagine just teams just rocking up and just qualifying, boom, straight in?
Well, drivers have already complained about, you don't get it in any other sport where you're not allowed to practice. You just go straight into competitive games. But I mean, I guess the theory is that practice is only exciting if you're really engaged, and they want to make each session more kind of sellable. But also, the way I see it is that practice is if you want a cheap bit of F1 experience, the day to go is Friday.
Yeah.
Because it's not competitive running, but you're still seeing cars on track. And I still think I hope practice doesn't go anywhere. And also, I mean, it's 3 sessions for you to talk as well, Alex.
Well, I mean, that's what the world's been lacking.
Me
making noise into a microphone. Yeah.
Less words for Jacques.
Yeah.
I'm not having
I see what you're saying about that. I'm a little bit astonished by the reaction for practice. I've got to say, I didn't think it was... I started watching in the late 90s as a kid when you got quali and the race. But there's a whole generation now who's got used to Friday. It's on in the background, much how I consume Test cricket. It's on in the background all day. You're enjoying it. It's totally different. I mean, that's the strange thing about doing testing, where it's effectively 3 days of the practice broadcast, and then going into Bahrain, which is always one of the more highest overtaking stats of the year. In that you're it's a different thing. It's much more like this. There could be a practice session going on in the background, and we might be talking about it, and it's fine. And then when there's a push lap, when there's a soft tire run, you're going to cover that off. You might have the ex-driver talk around it, and then you're back to this again. You're back to the discussion. So I think that was quite interesting. But yeah, I think that I'd be amazed in 5 years' time. I've got no inside knowledge on this at all, but I'd be amazed in 5 years' time if we still had 3 practice sessions.
Yeah, I think the way we're going, there's not going to be 3.
I don't think there's going to be any way in the future that length of time is going to be allowed to the drivers. But they're going to need something at the weekend to corroborate what they've seen in the sim, what the data says. So it's never going to be fully eradicated.
Well, we've got, what is it?
One practice session, sprint, qualifying race.
I was about to say.
No, sorry, that's the wrong way round. Qualifying.
Yeah, what's this new version?
Right, no, hold on.
Okay, fine, I'll roll
so
with
we're
it.
going
Yeah.
sprint, and then we're going...
Just keep sprinting.
Practice on the Monday afterwards.
Well, because we've got, is it 6 sprints this year?
Yeah.
I think, 6. I do feel like that is going to become the more prevalent. It will get to half, I think, eventually.
Well, it becomes that thing of, would you rather watch a practice session or a sprint race?
Yeah.
And you're always going to want to see the lights go out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's competitive running on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, not just Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. And the viewing figures spoke for themselves. I mean, I saw some. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was significantly higher because. And yes, it's a shame. I get the counter argument. A lot of people work on Fridays and can't necessarily catch qualifying, which is a huge part of. It's such a. I love qualifying. I think we've got a great format. I also think we should do one shot. I would love to see one shot.
That's interesting. Why the appeal of one shot? Because I'm old enough to remember one shot qualifying.
Yeah, but the thing is, the broadcast is so different these days.
That's true.
They could when they do the push lap in in testing, and they like do engine up. Whatever they
audio
call it.
up.
Yeah, that's it. You know, with the coverage you get, it's like I swear the last 2 qualifying sessions, Albon's gone off on his own and got like a full lap. I bet the real would have loved that.
The old Minardi trick.
Yes.
Quick, out you go, boys.
Satisfy the sponsors, let's have
need
it.
the
Yeah, but didn't they
airtime,
put like
out you go.
no fuel in it as well? So they'd like go and fight at the front.
Yeah, Frost and Minardi putting. Yeah.
Well, they do, like, well, I guess one shot in IndyCar for the Indy
Yeah.
500, and it feels like a bit of a spectacle when they do that. So
I
I feel like
think-
there's
I think
definitely,
at
there's definitely
certain
potential
tracks-
for it.
I would love to see. I'm pitching this to you, Alex. You got connections, right?
I have no power.
You've got so many connections.
Alex has all the power
You can
in
make
his
it
decision,
happen.
ladies and gentlemen.
Monaco, 1 shot, and mandate a 2-stop. Fix Monaco.
Take a 2-stop.
Because everyone
Thing
shunts
suggested
and
for
ruins everyone
Monaco
else's.
is an entirely separate pod. I'd have him run every tyre compound.
Oh, yeah, let's hear
I'd have a
everything.
different technical package for that race. It would, it's an outlier. Let's chuck everything at it. Yeah, 1 shot. It effectively is already though, isn't it? You get 2 goes in that quali session.
Yeah, but someone shunts and it ruins your lap. Whereas in 1 shot,
If you shunt, it ruins your lap.
Yeah,
it only ruins your lap.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
feel like that's happened multiple.
If we get
2 years in a row.
another driver crashing at the end of Monaco, bringing out a red flag, they will be adopting the if you bring out the red flag, your time gets deleted.
Yeah.
If it happens
I
again,
think so,
I think
yeah.
there's like 1 chance left for someone to pull.
Yeah,
the
we
trigger.
can't. Yeah, if we did 1 shot though, we can't have another Nico Rosberg.
No.
Mirror gate. That's the only thing.
No.
That was
I did
that's
enjoy
box
that.
office.
Yeah, that started the whole.
Or
beef.
Schumacher when it was like, oh no.
Oh, why?
You see that wasn't. You see that? Well, he didn't sell it enough. He didn't sell it enough. It was too obvious he'd parked up at Rascal.
No,
good enough
'cause
acting.
I think that
Rosberg sold it.
Yeah, he really did.
I
The little wiggle as he locked up. Sorry, go.
it didn't.
He's retired now. We can say
Yeah,
that. It's absolutely nonsense, Nico.
No, I think I don't know if the fan base is coming. Again, it's one of them things that I just think over time people will just adjust and get used to it. And I do think competitive running on 3 days is inevitable as far as I'm concerned. But
Yeah.
shall we have a little talk about the teams? Because there's been a few interesting kind of dynamics. I'll talk briefly about Mercedes, actually.
Yeah.
We obviously, they've been talking about big upgrades coming to their car. I know Toto Wolff's been quoted saying 6 to 12 months until, that's how far behind they feel like they are from Red Bull at the moment.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, I think, a dynamic with George and Lewis where it's very different to the Bottas-Hamilton dynamic,
Oh,
as
yeah,
far as I'm
massively,
concerned.
yeah.
Because George is very much like you were saying, he won F2 convincingly ahead of Lando, ahead of Alex. He's the real deal. Last weekend there was Lewis? Lewis was on the medium behind George. There's certainly a degree of George isn't just going to get out of the way of Lewis. I think that's now clear as day. I think we saw that at Zandvoort, particularly last year.
Yeah.
How does Toto manage that situation? Because you've got 7-time world champion, arguably the greatest of all time, George Russell, he's brought in to be the future of that team. This is a difficult transitional period, not just in the car, but
Future and
the team as
present
well.
are coming together, and he has PTSD about the Nico Lewis situation.
Yeah, right. No,
Fair point.
right. No, because Toto inherited that situation. Like, what does Toto do going forward?
It's less of a problem for him if the car continues to be off the pace. The moment the
correct.
car is
Oh yeah.
on the pace, Brazil last year was. You talk about sweating for your first Grand Prix victory. You've got a 7-time world champion over your shoulder, and they must have been praying that Lewis is way too wise for this at this stage of his career, but they must have been praying no late lunges into turn 1, because you can come from, as he's shown us in his career, he's come from miles back in that corner in the
Yeah.
and trying to keep the win record in every season going, that ludicrous win record he had, and there wasn't a hint of it. They worked very well together. You put it at the sharp end, then you are going to have to start to get involved, because I think we'll see this with Checo and Max this year. No team dynamic is happy when the only 2 people who can take the victory in that moment are part of the same team. That said, management, does managing ever work? It didn't work at Red Bull in the past when you had Webber and when you had Vettel, Multi-21 and all of that nonsense. They tried to get Nico and Lewis to stop crashing into each other, but it didn't go particularly successfully, did it? Ultimately, when the adrenaline's
Just
up,
happened more.
when they're 2 of the best drivers in the world and there's a win on the line, I don't think there's anything you can say on the team radio at all.
No.
And even if you've got the stature of Toto Wolff and you've got all those titles, I think you're going to have a hard time calling off the fight.
You need that clear 1-2 dynamic, don't you, to make that work?
You do, but there's no way you can have that at Mercedes, like we've said. Like,
That's the thing. Like
George is just too good.
Yeah.
To be.
And George knows that
Lewis
this is
is
an
Lewis.
opportunity for him. I mean, you look in the past, Schumacher, Barrichello, there was that clear 1-2 dynamic. I think, even though Valtteri had some strong starts to the season relative to Lewis.
1 year contract every time for Valtteri. So
Yeah.
very little he could ever do.
Yeah.
The answer was always going to be yes if you fancied coming back next year.
Yeah.
Which was that was a version of the management. That was absolutely a version of the management because that is a tool that Toto Wolff had available to him. You could have put Valtteri on he was his manager for goodness sake. Could have put him on a 3-year deal, but just wanted that control that he didn't have with Rosberg. And then electing to get rid of that control by bringing Russell in. But the good thing for them is that they worked together really well last year to make that car a winning car along with the team. I think the deflation for them is that they're back to square one with it.
Yeah. That is the...
And then that's the tough thing. And that's what I was saying, last time. It's like all of that work, especially that Lewis was having to do in developing that car at the start of the season to get to a point where you win in Brazil, 1-2, to then be behind Aston Martin and back where you started again is...
It's just sport, though, isn't it? Like,
it is just
dominance
sport,
never
but
lasts forever.
No.
Never.
I mean,
disappointing.
you get dominance in most sport. If you look across the board, you get runs, you get dynasties, but it's absolutely impossible to... I mean, the fact that he nearly got a decade worth of dominance hasn't happened in Formula One before. I doubt it will happen in Formula One again because of the way the rules will be written and tightened up and altered to make sure it's competitive. So that was a ridiculous run, but eventually it's going to come to an end.
Could we see the FIA intervening with Red Bull? Because right now that package is looking incredibly competent. But then also you look at, for me, it's as much Ferrari doing. It's as much Red Bull doing a good job as it is Mercedes making no progress, progress relative race pace wise to last year, in line with everyone else.
Yeah.
And Ferrari seemingly taking a bit of step backwards because their race pace, at Saudi this year, was pretty much the same as it was last year, with the track changes taken into account as well. And so I think we've had 2 races and it's this 22 race season, but it is very hard to look past Red Bull. Now, obviously, Checo, Max is a different conversation, but in my opinion, it's there's been discourse online about FIA should step in. For me, it's way too early. That car didn't even dominate all of last year.
We also haven't seen the aero penalty come into play.
No, that hasn't had time to kind of kick in.
So,
but do you think that it's because there's been examples in the past where the FIA has changed the rules and it's oh no, we changed the floors so the Mercedes and the Aston Martin Racing Point was like collateral damage for that regulation change.
Sorry, lads, but
so then do you think that's going to happen? Do you think it should happen? Do you think it's Red Bull should just enjoy the fruits of their labour?
You've got to... Well, the FIA would have to work out where the Red Bull is at its most effective. They would have to then create a regulation change. It's hard to work out. The thing that's making the Red Bull devastating is that it's got the widest operating window of any car.
Yeah.
So if you change one thing, it might not throw it off. The reason McLaren are at the back at the moment is they raised the ride height by the tiny, realistically 15 millimeters, right? That's completely thrown McLaren off. That's how narrow their operating window is. Red Bull's operating window is a skylight. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So even if you change something to try and slow them down, you might have a knock-on effect of slowing the rest of the field.
Yeah.
more.
So, and if you ignore Red Bull for 5 seconds of this argument, it is incredibly close for the rest of the field.
Yeah, true.
Arguably the closest I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
There's no slowest team. There's no nailed on back marker. You're going to get race winners going out in Q1. I mean, you are getting race winners going out in Q1. That is unbelievably competitive. And so it's worked in that regard. But yeah, I think Red Bull would fight that
Problem is as well.
vociferously if you were like, okay,
Yeah.
2 races of domination, chaps. Thanks so much for your efforts. We're cutting that part of the floor out. We're cutting that part of the floor out. That's a dangerous game.
Red Bull are only allowed 3 wheels for the rest of the season.
I can't see them doing that. But it made me think of, when you were saying there, it made me think of the old classic rule changes in the past that the FIA would bring in mysteriously. Like the Michelin tyres were suddenly too wide, having raced them for 3 seasons. That, okay, we're gonna have to change the tyres, or the Renault suspension has been
one-stop
banned.
Bridgestones,
and there used to be a mysterious rule change that came in if anyone other than the Scarlet cars were at the front of the field. So
this is what I mean.
Precedent for it, but I'd be surprised if it happened now. If it's 5 years of domination,
I think that's kind of a different story, right? And I think you've got to give these regulations a chance to do what they were designed to do. Yeah. That's the way I say it. It was never going to happen after 1 season. Mm-hmm. It was always going to take minimum 2 seasons for that historical offset of Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes having all this money.
Yeah.
For me, it was always going to take at least 2 years for that for then the other teams to be able to, utilize their increased ATR time and their, to close that gap. Mm-hmm. So it is too reactive. But I get it, because it's like it's frustrating where it already feels like a foregone conclusion. But then it's just hope that, for me, it's Aston Martin. If anyone's going to catch him, it's Aston, because they've got all this aero
time. Yeah.
And Fernando's driving the wheels off it, and he's picked up 2 P3s to start the season, so he's not fallen off completely. Like we saw this time last year, even after the 3rd race, after Australia, Red Bull Max DNF'd again, and they were 50 points behind Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. Mm-hmm. It can change quick. Like, do we think going into Australia, knowing the track and its characteristics, do you see any particular teams? Because Ferrari struggled seemingly more in Saudi than in Bahrain, I'd say. But then they won in Australia last year, so maybe their car's going to... McLaren did well in Australia last year as well. Yeah. Do you see that being a bit different?
I think McLaren are in a holding pattern until Baku, and they get the updates. I think anything that McLaren get is a bonus before Baku, and then effectively that's their first race. Ferrari are really struggling with the front end of the car. Their race pace on the hard tyre was horrible. So they're not fully in an understanding of why that tyre degradation is as serious as it is, and until they can get the grip from the front end of the car, they're just going to be taking that pain lap after lap after lap after lap. So I don't think they're going to be in the same brilliant form. Leclerc, that was his most dominant win, wasn't it, last year? So they're not going to be in the mix. It's a question of, Alonso's got a good record, winner before around Albert Park.
He almost put it on the second row, maybe in front row, didn't he, last year?
Yeah, so he did. He
true,
fastest of anyone through the
middle. And the hydraulics went.
And the hydraulics
and he broke his hand.
Yeah. We're going back through it. It's like, remember the season together.
Yeah.
Wow. But it was ridiculous. And he's kept it quite well. Someone's racing with an injury at all times and keeping it hushed up, because you never want to get out the car, because you never know who's coming in, and that might be the end. There are very few safe seats in Formula One, even if you're Fernando Alonso. So he could be in quali. He's just it was great to be able to see him fight at the front again. Him taking the lead. He won his first race. He won his first race when I was 14 years old.
Was it 2000?
2003, and I'm commentating on Fernando Alonso in the lead again. Just for a second, I just completely what? How is he still at it? He's still taking the lead in Grand Prix. It was fantastic, but I think it'll be a private battle between Max and Checo again, and I think that's going to be the reality for a while. Monaco could throw in a curveball, but I think that's the reality for a while.
Question is, can Checo keep up the?
That's what I was about to say.
We saw this a few seasons with Bottas and Hamilton, where Bottas would start the season strong, look close, and then I think Valtteri's talked about this in terms of just
Checo last season, right, as well.
Exactly,
100 points off,
and it's it's one thing again to from Valtteri saying it's one thing to start the season, but to keep up that that mental strength that you need to sustain it throughout an entire season when you've got such a competitor like Lewis for Valtteri, or like Max for Checo, who's not going to give you any concessions. I think that's fair to say.
Even for 6th or 5th or wherever it was.
Do you think this? We were talking about the radios, even for that, talking about the radios and there's definitely a degree of insecurity there. I think from Checo's point of view that Max is gonna try and collect. They're not just going to settle. Do you think this is this just normal?
Yeah.
Like, are we just making a bigger deal with something that is actually pretty normal and not that deep?
It's a 2-horse race for the foreseeable future. Be fear, paranoia, loathing, history will be in there. Hugh Bird has got a big role to play. He's Checo's race engineer.
Yep.
He's going to have to keep his driver confident that there isn't something going on.
Yeah.
But Checo knows that Max is going to go for everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the nature of it. So can he win on the circuits where he's traditionally good at? If he can pinch a Baku,
Street circuits.
if he can, always been phenomenal there.
Always been
If he can start doing that, then he's going to change people's opinions, because I think the majority of the paddock at the moment believe that it's a foregone conclusion for Max. But he's been on the podium before. He's won in Baku, been on the podium before when he was in a team that shouldn't have been anywhere near it. Monaco, obviously last year, delivered under huge pressure. So if he can start doing that, then he can start changing the narrative. And then you got to remember, those garages are like normal office environments. If your team believe that you're in the hunt, if they believe that you're more of a challenger than they maybe thought at the start of the year, then momentum can be a funny thing. It can be a really, really weird thing. There are plenty of plenty of seasons in this sport's history where drivers get an opportunity and take their opportunity. And if you're Nico Rosberg, retire immediately, because he knew he was never going to take that opportunity ever again. So, and I think if you'd done a paddock poll halfway through 2016, few people would have backed him to beat Lewis over a full campaign. So the great thing about it is that, we said in qualifying last week in Jeddah, there are no foregone conclusions until you've crossed the checker flag, and then sometimes, due to some strange penalties, even then, it's not in the bag. So,
Well, I guess that's the one potential upside of Red Bull being seemingly so dominant at the moment, is that Red Bull then, look, hopefully Checo can stay close to Max, because we all want a championship fight. I'm sure even the biggest Max Verstappen fans doesn't want to see Max just walk it with because then that takes away a lot of the so much about sporting victories. It's not just winning; it's how you win.
It's the journey along the way.
Of course, it is absolutely. The one possible benefit is that they're so clear that the Red Bull team allow them to fight, kind of like Mercedes had to in 14, 15, 16. Their car was so clear, they didn't need to worry so much about, obviously they tried to calm it down, but they still won the constructors, they still won the drivers in all three of those seasons.
It feels like there's no threat really to a constructors championship at all this season, so you can actually allow them to.
But also them fighting and taking points off of each other then potentially allows, when we get into the second half of the season, if Aston Martin, if Ferrari, if they can pull their fingers out, then
I just don't think we've seen any evidence that Sergio Perez is going to allow that sort of arrangement. Even at Bahrain, when he was like, hang on a second, lads, why am I being told... No, not sorry, Bahrain, Saudi. Hang on a second, why am I being told to do a certain lap?
That's what I mean. He's like, nah. What? No. What's that? What do you mean? What do you mean, though? Because you don't
think he would even
that
question that if he was like,
but fair
it's
enough.
fine, I don't mind being a number 2 driver.
I think
he's going to fight.
Checo's just got to assume that Max is just going to drive selfishly for the victory every single time. You just got to assume that.
that's what Checo's doing.
Yeah,
It's exactly
of course,
the same thing.
Yeah.
He's like, that's great. You sort yourself up for P3 behind, and then the problem comes if they go wheel to wheel and it doesn't go to plan.
That's what I mean. It's totally different to 2021.
Yeah.
Where Checo knew what he was signed for, and he did that job immaculately.
Yeah.
And now that season's long gone. Now it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
And fire with fire, right?
Yeah.
I hope he sustains.
I really
Do
hope
you think
sustains it.
do we think he actually can? Do we think he can actually sustain a challenge to Max? Because Max isn't just good. Max is good.
Yeah, Max is an all-time great, waiting for his Wikipedia page to reflect it with the number of titles. It's just a matter of time before
Waiting
he gets
to fill it up.
Just waiting to fill up the roster of victories. That's the joy of the sport. That's the joy of the sport. If he takes Verstappen in a championship fight deep into the year, he would have changed so many people's opinion on his ability as a driver. And history would say it's going to be very, very hard. If you're 3/10 of a second off that driver on average behind him in qualifying, like it was last year, it's going to be hard. But that Red Bull's got such an advantage. That's usually going to mean you're on the front row. So suddenly it's a different story. We've seen incredible performances where drivers who no one gave a chance to, Damon Hill in 1994 is the great example of this. No one thought Damon Hill was capable of leading that Williams team at all. And if he'd made it through one corner and overtaken on the straight, he would have been world champion. So you just never know whether a driver's got it within them and they've never had the opportunity. So to conclude, game on. It's
on. Yes, lads, we've got a championship.
Over recent history, it's felt like Max has got somewhat untouchable since we've seen him against Ricciardo, and he hasn't had to fight a teammate properly because he done such a convincing job on Gasly, Albon, and Perez at the start.
But he's also had the problem with that in that there were not two drivers pushing that team forward in the same way, which is not to attack the proven talent of Albon and Gasly because they're very, very fast. They just couldn't.
They were young.
They couldn't unlock the car.
Yeah.
And the team made a conscious decision to stop developing the car to a precipice where it could only be driven a certain way.
Yeah.
And since they've done that,
Yeah.
they're constructors champions again.
Yeah.
So they've made a conscious decision to do that and to just dial it back a bit, broader operating window. Now look what's happened. They've got the broadest operating window of everyone, and they're going to win the constructors by guarantee. So then you've got a 2-horse race. So, if it's not one problem, it's another. But Max lost out on the setup, having a second car there, and so, but he is going to have to get used to it. Much in the same way that Lando Norris is going to have to get used to Oscar Piastri being a slightly more adaptable driver. So, but that will just bring the best out of them. They're elite drivers. It will just bring a better performance out. It always does.
This is
Unless,
what
of
we
course,
want to see.
Max and Checo spend the season crashing into each other, in which case we've got an absolute classic.
And through comes along.
Hey, hopefully. Well, maybe in Australia this weekend. We'll see. We got any, what should we say, predictions?
Early prediction.
Predictions for the race. I mean, it's hard to look past Max and Checo 1-2, isn't it? Do we have any, rather than that, I'd say, do we have any particular predictions, like an out there one, like, or Alfa Romeo going to be really strong, for example? Like your knowledge of the track and of the drivers and who's suited to who, because it's kind of a hybrid street track.
Yeah.
Because it's got the close walls.
It is a strange, it's a closed off park, but they are public roads. But it is a semi-permanent facility.
Yeah.
So do have a runoff, but the walls aren't that far away. Is there going to be a bolter again? I think Williams, I'd focus on Williams. They're coming out of a weekend for the first time where they feel they underperformed, which is not a thing that Williams have had for a while. They felt that they had the pace for points and they didn't get them. That then puts the onus on the drivers to deliver. And I actually think, Albon got an audacious strategy to get a point last year, but I think I think Albon especially will be in the mix for points this year. And again, it's a case of, do you go for the normal strategy and try and bag 8th, or do you try something audacious and you really try to get in the mix if the Ferraris are struggling with tyres again?
Yeah. Do we see anyone try that again, by the way? Because that was one of the most unique strategies I think I've ever seen.
Did anyone, in terms of in the paddock, was everyone shocked by that?
Yeah. That was not a viable strategy. That was a complete roll of the dice.
It must have been almost kind of not hard to keep up with, but hard to understand that it was happening. Sort of. You're commentating over and being like, hang on a second.
You do sometimes have races where you're looking at the monitor and you're like, no, he hasn't pitted. And he's got to pit. Okay, so he hasn't pitted, and you're like, and then you forget.
Is that a technical glitch?
You've gone beyond lap 45, so you're like texting, has he pitted? And you're trying to go back through, and you're like, okay, he hasn't pitted. And for them to make it work, that's all a team. They got more pace than this time last year, so they don't need to go to such extremes.
But also, if Logan doesn't get his lap time deleted at Saudi in qualifying, which was, it didn't add any pace to it, he actually out-qualified Alex.
It wasn't enough to get into Q2.
He would have got into Q2.
Another teammate sitting up straight and going, hold on.
Yeah.
Different story.
That's what I mean, which is what we want to, we want all of these teammate battles to be close at the end of the day. It's always going to be more entertaining.
Is there one on the grid?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
I really think.
Even Joe's close up to
Stroll
Bottas.
has improved. I think
Stroll's
this season. I think both the performances from Stroll, whilst injured, have been very solid.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, he shouldn't really be anywhere near a car.
He couldn't get out at Bahrain.
If he was being sensible, I think he'd be maybe starting his season this weekend.
Yeah.
But he's, again, we're talking about changing opinions in the paddock.
Yeah.
He's completely changed the perception by getting in there and grafting his way to some points that, should Mercedes and Ferrari suddenly develop very, very quickly. They could be vital points come the end of the year. It could make a huge difference to the team.
Well, at Saudi, Lance was within a 10th in Q1, a 10th in Q2, and a 2 and a bit tenths in Q3 from Fernando.
That's just because he bottled the end of the lap, though, didn't he? I think
Yeah, and he had a stinky last sector as well, didn't he? Yeah. So it's kind of, you're right. I don't think there really is any massive discrepancies between teammates throughout the field, which is happy
Good
days.
news.
Now we just need the cars to be the same.
Yeah.
Okay? No, not actually the same.
Actually, the same one. Spec series.
Closer.
Tommo likes Tommo wants an F1 spec series, everyone.
Oh, no, practice has gone.
No.
Spec series.
Illuminati
Have some respect for
confirmed.
the heritage, Tommo.
Get Ferrari out of the sport next. I've heard it all.
Delete
from
them.
Tommo,
Just
mate.
team 1, team 2. Who needs team names anymore?
ABC.
What do we need? Right, Alex. Towards the end of these podcasts, we like to do a section called, we call it equal.
What should we? I feel like we almost need to rename it to an extent because it's not technically
Equality.
Equality. Should we just change it to equality?
Equality
Is that what we're
streak.
doing?
Like
Equality.
the chocolate. Like the chocolates.
What is this feature?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we're working it out on the fly, really.
Well, explain the feature, and then maybe Alex can help us come up with a name.
I think the best way to explain this feature now, because it has evolved,
Yeah.
is basically we are allocated 3 drivers. We're given a question, and we have to argue for that driver,
Oh, I see.
whether we believe it or not.
I
And then at the end, we have to decipher whether we.
But it
meant
could also
or
be
not.
teams.
It can
could
be
all
teams. It can be a driver in equal machinery. It can be a certain like. Now this week, I believe we have got
We're talking ye olde.
ye olde days. Well, ye olde. It's not all, but
So the topic is which driver retired too soon out of these 3. So, Niran, you've been allocated Nico Rosberg.
okay, that was the first one I thought of. To be honest with you.
I have been allocated Mika Hakkinen.
Nice.
Oh, that's good.
Actually retired.
Sabbatical,
And
still on a sabbatical.
Alex, you've been given Sebastian Vettel.
Ooh.
So
I've been given the easiest one.
we've got a minute. A minute to promote the cause that our driver retired far too soon,
Yes.
relative particularly to the others. Who wants to go first? Who's feeling? You actually, Alex,
Yeah.
you're going to go first because you were so confident.
Okay.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you've got a minute, by the
So
way.
you've got a minute to
Got a minute.
why you think
Explain
Sebastian Vettel
why.
retired too soon.
Okay. Here we go.
Starting now.
So, Sebastian Vettel retired too soon because have you seen that car this year? Sebastian Vettel back at the front of the field, up against his old team in Red Bull. Back to those moments of him getting involved 4 wide down to Lake Como at Spa. Oh, it could have been fantastic. It would have been, there were points last year in Japan where, a year ago, he was doing a lap of honor in Australia. And it was obvious he was thinking about retiring. He gets to Japan, and then suddenly it's like the beast was reawakened, wheel to wheel with Fernando Alonso. And just imagine him in the mix there, scrapping for wins again. And we've been denied it because he retired too soon.
You only needed 43 seconds.
It's like he's a professional.
Yeah, it's like you do this for a living, Alex.
43 seconds, I had longer.
Yeah, you had time. You had time. Do you want to use the remaining 17? Nah, it's fine.
I think I made the case.
You made a very good case.
Yeah, I feel that was summed up pretty well.
Okay, we're giving it to you next.
When's Minton going to go as well?
Minton's going to do my turn.
Okay, yeah. Safe. You just burp into the
Mika
mic.
Hakkinen? His? No, you don't. Okay.
Before his time.
Yeah, just a little bit. Right. Why did Nico Rosberg retire too soon, Niran? Go.
Well, simply put, for the fact that as soon as he won something, he was like, "Nah, I'm out." Like you can't. I'm afraid if you're going to be an elite driver over a long period of time, you can't just win one title and then say that is it. I've done my piece here. You've not completed Formula One just because you've won the championship once. And also in going along kind of sort of a similar path to yours, Mercedes continued their dominance for a solid spell with Valtteri Bottas and Lewis as well for another, 4 seasons, and then the Max versus Lewis battle. There's another 2 championships in there for you if you really want it. Not only could you have won more, but you also chose to escape as soon as you grabbed one. For me, if you're winning a championship, no matter what team you're in, you have to be in your prime. So to retire in your prime means you're retiring far too early from the sport.
Boom.
Nice.
56 seconds.
Nice.
I do I do like the idea of that 2017 when Ferrari were up there with Vettel, 2017, 2018. With Rosberg taking points off Hamilton potentially as well.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that would have been so cool.
Vettel would be up too.
Potentially. Potentially.
He probably would.
Yeah.
If Rosberg had stayed with the team.
And if they'd have kept like fighting, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Vettel would have been there to pick up the pieces, no?
Yeah, I think Lewis would have probably been Vettel's teammate if they carried on fighting. I don't think he was going to put up with that for much longer.
Yeah.
I think he would have left the team pretty quickly.
Yeah, honestly, because what was Nico's contract situation at the time? Like, how long did he have left on his contract when he retired?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, not sure.
It wasn't up because obviously they had to scramble for Valtteri.
Well,
they weren't
paid Williams like
expecting
10 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing he had like 1 or 2 years left on it.
No, it makes you just think, doesn't it? Like the butterfly effect of these things.
Yeah.
If Nico doesn't do that, and if you stay, you could. What? He's 30. He's still a lot younger than Fernando.
Early. Yeah, super early.
Like he was 31 when he retired. Yeah. If he hadn't retired, like he's still got years in the tank for sure, easily. How does that affect the entire like?
Who replaced Valtteri at Williams?
Stroll?
We would never have seen Stroll.
Was it?
Well,
Was it? Yeah, Stroll's 2017, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because that was his first year at that team, I think.
So he would never
With
have got
Sorokin.
He's on the podium that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
His dad wouldn't have bought a team. We wouldn't have Aston Martin.
Oh my God! Stop. Oh, it freaks me out.
And then just deleted my answer. you stay on the farm. So you got the right call.
That's
you
crazy.
stay farming your coffee.
Right. Come on then, Minton. Why did Mika Hakkinen retire too early? Go. Well, he didn't technically retire. He's actually on sabbatical, and he's still got it. All right. I saw him at the F1 Arcade launch, and he still looked ready and prepared to go.
Ready to hop in that seat.
Although I had a few, so I think I like tapped him on the shoulder. I was like, legend, something along those lines. He was probably who's this freak who's just attacked me. But anyway, Mika Hakkinen, for me, growing up, he was my favourite driver. He was the one who took it to Michael Schumacher and beat him in that phenomenal McLaren of the day. Now his finish, there's something about the finish. Him and Kimi, for me, in their primes, they're right up there in the argument. And you think how much Mika delivered in his time at McLaren, the potential was so much higher. I think he could have done more. I think he could have and he should have done more because he was just a great character as well. Great character in the sport. It's not just about performing at the top. It's the whole package that you bring. And I think the character of Mika Hakkinen is sorely missed as far as I'm concerned.
I hear that. I miss Mika Hakkinen. Well, he's going back. It's still a sabbatical. Don't worry.
Do you reckon?
It's going back. Yeah.
One day.
Yeah. In a Mercedes.
The opportunity. No,
And
so
Lewis with the Lewis
genuinely, because when we look at these three drivers, particularly, I think Rosberg, well, particularly with Rosberg and Vettel, I think it really demonstrates something that these drivers aren't just names, they are human beings and they have lives outside of Formula One. And not everyone, like not all footballers love football.
Yeah.
Have you heard a Ben White interview?
Ben White actually absolutely
love
hates
it. I love it. It's so odd, isn't it?
I don't watch
He's
football.
so good at something, he's just clocks in, clocks out.
Yeah.
The end.
Done.
It is like an office. It's like an office job.
It's not a passion for everyone.
Mad. Yeah.
Which is fascinating with the sport. But yeah, I do. It is funny with Seb, isn't it? Because I can't begrudge the man for, he wants to prioritise different things in his life and fine. Yeah. But you're right, like, especially the end of the last season, it felt like that kind of released him somewhat. And the performances were, he had how it ended to Ferrari wasn't ideal, and the start at Aston Martin, even like the first race of last year, was it Australia when he just spun, didn't he?
Yeah, they had a terrible Australia last year.
They had a stinker, and by the end of it, he was looking every bit as...
Yeah.
I went toe to toe with Fernando in Suzuka, like you say.
Yeah.
So
Japan. Yeah.
That was so good. I think the Ferrari years burnt a lot of emotional energy that could have extended his career. And it's hard. It's hard coming back. Like winning 4 titles in a row would have burnt a lot as well. Because it's just the standard that you need. You're giving your whole life over to it. Yeah. You're turning down, and there's only so long you can. He's got a big family. There's only so long you can ignore the family before it starts to get to you. And he clearly had his worldview was getting broader, wasn't it? He was considering things that weren't just racing.
Yeah.
But part of me would have loved to see what he could have done.
Yeah.
With the car he's got this year.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, actually. Like, sort of, I feel like Sebastian Vettel experienced every single type of season and every single type of emotion during his career.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't the longest, You know, you had the up-and-coming Toro Rosso days, you had the dominant Red Bull days, you had the getting beaten by your teammate after that Red Bull days, you had the challenger days at Ferrari, you had the terrible days at Ferrari, and you had the winding things down at Aston Martin, sort of. So,
Well, I think as much as it is a shame.
Experienced everything at that point
Yeah.
when he retired.
Well, and I think he can have no regrets. That's the thing, right? Yeah, he retired in his mid-30s, but that's also not that unusual. You look at, typically it's mid to 35, 36, 37.
Titles on the shelf.
Yeah.
Nothing else to
He
prove.
can have no regrets.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way.
I think part of us just
has
looked at his
regrets.
teammate, Kimi, just still being there, being like 40, and was just
But,
like, oh, it's a bit old.
Kimi and Fernando are like,
early, sorry,
they're
Zach,
not the rule. They are the exception.
Facts, yeah.
Like, you look at the numbers. You don't get drivers lasting this long since in the 50s when they were all in their 40s.
Yeah,
You know?
Those were the
It's absolutely
days.
true. But then they didn't always have seatbelts or crash helmets, so it's a somewhat different challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw, what did you see?
Back
Kimi,
in my day, we didn't need to.
Kimi and Jensen in the NASCAR as
Gave him
well.
a whack,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Catch any of that? Yeah, he did.
Gave him a whack.
Kimi gave Jensen a whack.
Is it?
Yeah, it was a bit bumper cars. I don't know if you saw Jensen's post-race interview, but he was he was very honest.
He was exhausted. It was
Yeah.
a really good post-race chat, wasn't
It
it?
was. Well, I saw a bunch of NASCAR fans in the comments like being like, "Oh, this is like really refreshing." Like hearing a driver be this honest about the series because he was talking about how it was very bumper cars and it was very like, oh yeah, like it's totally different style of racing. But it's nice to see them two still racing.
Yeah. No, it is. It's good. It's good.
And I always wonder about, again, look, Rosberg retired for his own reasons. He felt like he won that championship and that was it. He'd achieved that goal. And I feel like Max has mentioned like that he's won that championship. Anything more now is a bonus.
Yeah.
And I think again, it's an example of, Max started super early and he could retire in 2028. He would have still had how long would have his career would have been?
14 year. Yeah.
Which is,
That is mad.
when you think about that, because he started so early, I wouldn't begrudge him for retiring early, like in his 30s. Because,
Wait, so that means he's in his 9th season now.
Yeah. He had to wait a really long time to get a championship challenge because they started him so
early.
ludicrously
As a
soon.
child.
Yeah.
it's
Signed
actually
his
mad.
contract at 16. didn't he?
He didn't have a license, did he? Barbaric.
criminal.
Yeah, I do. I hope Nico doesn't have any regrets retiring as early as he did, because he clearly, he went toe to toe with Lewis, and
Yeah.
was all the way.
I feel like he doesn't. I feel like he maybe thought. I feel like he might have thought about that decision maybe even before winning the championship.
Yeah, it must have
And
been
was
in
like-
the back of his mind.
It has to. He can't have just been like, "Well, I've arrived now. That's it. It's a wrap." Because I feel like you just wouldn't make that sort of decision so quickly. I feel like that's something that maybe he thought about before, but I don't know. Who knows?
I think that's right. I think that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Alex, mate, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me.
And where can everyone find you who's watching and listening?
F1 TV, Channel 4, YouTube afterwards, Formula 2 as well.
The
God,
voice.
it's quite a lot of work to do now. Everywhere, even if you don't want it.
Getting tired just thinking about it. How are you? So we're filming this on Tuesday
Yes.
afternoon. So you've got, it's Thursday night, right?
Yeah.
/ Friday morning. So what's the plan next couple of days?
Prep tomorrow, and then nice big pub lunch on Thursday, nap in the afternoon, and then get cracking at midnight.
Good.
What does prep look like quickly as well? I'm just I'm
Is
interested.
it all the sheets of paper? Though?
Yeah, it's all the sheets of paper and then distilling it down into 2 A4 sheets. Any more than that, you're looking around the commentary box. So
Yeah.
in your peripheral vision, and then
precise.
just the top lines of results from previous years, form around the circuit, and then the rest is all improv.
Beautiful.
Easy.
Beautiful.
Sensational.
Can't wait for it. Australia's one of my favourites. So
Yeah.
Such a-
yeah.
I like getting up early.
Such a good event.
It's just part of the experience, and I only have to do it a few times a year because we're lucky in this part.
Unlike the Australian fans,
Exactly.
you have to do it all the time.
Yeah, constantly. This one will not be getting up at all.
Oh no, he's going to be out
Yes.
on the lash, right, having a few drinks, and then
Terrific.
come straight in.
Yes. I will be in fancy dress and I will be drunk. So that is going to be
Fantastic.
a
think I've got
sensational
And yet you'll
experience.
probably make more sense than I will, having stayed up all night. So there you go.
We'll see. Right, let's wrap it up, Niran. Where can
Indeed.
everyone find us?
Well, yeah. So if you are watching on YouTube, then feel free to like and subscribe. Obviously, turn on notifications so you know when we upload. Obviously, you'll know when the show is because it's when the race is on. Is it 5 a.m. start or 6 a.m. start?
6 a.m. start. So
6 a.m. start, so we'll be
live
live at
5:30.
Indeed. Catch us on TikTok. If you are listening on Spotify, give us a good rating. Where else can we be found this weekend?
We can be found on
ASOS.
Tinder.
Yeah, we can be found on Tinder.
We're expanding.
Yeah, we're expanding into the dating scene. That's what's
network.
going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can find us on Tinder.
Yeah, we'll match with other
Hinge.
podcasts.
Yes, that's a good chat actually.
There you go.
Collab, match with them. We can be found on Boohoo Men as well.
Boohoo Man as well. Nice.
It's Boohoo
Boohoo Men.
Boohoo Men. That sounds like a dating app, doesn't it?
That sounds like a good
Different
side
kind.
to wrap it up.
Yeah, no,
Boohoo
fair.
Men.
But you can find us there as well.
Right. Cheers everyone for watching. Stay safe, be well, be happy, and we will see you in Australia. Not in Australia. I wish. We'll see you for the race. Bye, everyone.
Adios.
See you later.
Say bye, Minton. Bye bye.